Good afternoon and welcome to the final session of the UK Prop Fest webinar. Firstly, many thanks to our sponsors who've been involved with us throughout the whole journey: Barton Wilmore, Stantec, Janssens and Segro. I can't put these things on unless we have a bit of help and support. So thank you to them. They've been incredibly helpful and they provided us with loads of content and support. So hopefully we can work with you all again. So the final session, thank you. It's been a long 2 days. It's been some highs and lows, but we are definitely on up now. We've got everybody online, so I take that as a bonus, and we'll make the most of it. And we'll introduce them all in a minute. But first of all, let's just have a bit of a recap. What are we doing now? What is this session about? This session is about catching the business park. And it's the second time we've done this. But it was important. It's such an important subject. And interestingly, the subject has also changed fundamentally in the 2 months since the last time we did this. And that's really, really fascinating how the business park has changed and evolved with everything going on during COVID-19. So I will kick this off, but let's just have a look at the question. What are we trying to do here? What's the subject at hand? How will this asset class, the business park, benefit from the move towards lower density building and the implications for the occupier of offices and labs? Should developers be moving towards the science park template to increase occupier demand and increase investment yields? And what should be done to encourage occupiers to start returning to the office? So, and I think in some respects that last question is the elephant in the room, and it's quite an interesting debate about how that affects different parts of the country. Because certainly having listened to the last session, which is on the industrial market, with Segro and also Janssens, they are looking at a very healthy market, and the industrial market, along with data centers, is very healthy. But you could argue the closer you go into London, there's more of a, how can I say, a lack of momentum on the office market. But ironically, as you come towards the regions, Oxfordshire, Cambridge, there's a different story, but we'll hear more on that in a minute. So a bit of background. Clusters and centres of innovation have done well in the current market, especially the science and tech sectors, which are reflecting the occupancy rates and of the higher occupancy rates around the business parks in Oxford and Cambridge. Is there a shift towards different type of space and trends in different type of occupiers? Secondly, as we explored in previous sessions on this subject, there really is a move to rethink the location of office workers away from high density areas towards low density areas, such as the business park. But is this a trend or just a flash in the pan as companies react to COVID-19? Are we starting to look at at the documented ideas of a hub and spoke concept, where companies occupy buildings in satellite locations and then commute into the HQ when required? And I guess for the sake of this, you could say that's London. Are we looking where London becomes the epicenter, so to speak, and then around that are satellite offices? Or maybe the reverse. Maybe people have got examples out there of companies who are looking to completely move out of London. The past 5 months have been intense and fast-tracked so much, but arguably the rapid changes in the office sector have not been in people's agenda. This is still a relatively low occupancy rates everywhere. What is good, what is bad? Because it feels like a seismic shift has happened. So we've got a panel of 4, and we will now go and speak to them individually. So first person I just want to introduce, and someone I've worked with for a long, long time, is Rory Carson, who's Vice President of Maple Tree. Do you want to put your camera on, Rory? And there we go. Excellent, Rory. There we go. Good to see you, and welcome to this session. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well, thank you.
Good.
And you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Yeah, we're very well here at Bicester Motion, where we've been hosted for the last 2 days. So could you do us a favor, for those who don't know you, just describe your role, where Green Park fits within the business park agenda in your view, and also maybe just a kind of quick overview of how you see the market at the moment?
Yes, quite a big number of topics there, but just for anyone who's not familiar with Green Park, I'll give you a very brief introduction. So Green Park is at junction 11 of the M4 on the outskirts of Reading. We are a business community spanning about 195 acres of land. We've currently got 19 office buildings built, comprising about 1.4 million square feet. We've got another 2 buildings under construction, totaling 234,000 square feet. They're due for completion later this year. And pre-COVID, we had around 8,000 staff coming to work on Green Park. Around 60 of the businesses based on the park are our direct occupiers, and then there are dozens more businesses who occupy the 2 serviced offices, Landmark and Regis, on the park. So predominantly office use with some supporting retail and leisure amenities, gyms, creches, and so on. We're one of the older and more established parks in the Thames Valley area. It started to be built in 1998, so we just celebrated our 21st birthday, and it's proved very successful over the years. The biggest challenge was around the dot-com bubble bursting in the early 2000s, and since then it's been a robust asset and a robust asset class. As at today, we're standing at an occupancy of 95%, and the rents at Green Park are very comparable with the rents in Reading Town Centre.
Okay, that's great. And so just as just a quick, because obviously we're contrasting slightly different markets here. In terms of the Reading market, have you seen a change in the last 4 or 5 months? Is it busy? Is it not busy? What's your feedback?
Generally, the market has been quiet. Deals have transacted, but those deals have been those were deals that were under offer before the lockdown began. Since then, it has been quiet generally throughout Reading and the majority of the surrounding areas, with most businesses being, particularly, we're about 55% TMT occupiers on Green Park, and those businesses, by the nature of what they do, are actually very well set up for remote working. A large part of their work styles anyway involved some degree of flexible and remote working, so they've been relatively easily able to make the transition to remote working, and have found that to be generally productive, which is sort of one quite important measure that they're using. Obviously, there is the bigger question of when to return to the office and what benefits that brings, but that's a slightly different question, and not a sort of single answer to that one.
No, and we'll get to that. Don't worry. Don't. Yeah, you're right. And I did give you a wide remit, so you're very good. Well done. Thank you for that. And it's interesting. I just want to get that contrast, which is quite important, between Thames Valley and perhaps the legacy cities like Oxfordshire, heritage cities like Oxford and Cambridge have a slightly different dynamic. So that's very helpful. Okay, Roy, we'll come back to you. That's very helpful. Perhaps we could get Andrew Squires on the line now. Andrew, are you there? There we go. Great, Andrew. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great, all works. Good to have you there. Yeah, Andrew, you're a project director at Bulb Laboratories. Could you give us, because you're sort of at the front end, if you see what I mean. What's your experience of the marketplace in terms of changing needs, and secondly, just to give us a market overview, just explain what your role is.
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Bulb now for just under a year, which has been quite a journey through Brexit and COVID. But I'm still here, which I think is a good sign, and good sign for the business, and probably a good sign that we are sort of heavily focused within the science sector. Obviously, great time, and it's an exciting sector to be in anyway. But yeah, it's it's a really good time to be part of that. My role, yeah, I think it's about relationships. It's about trying to identify the next opportunity. It's also really really trying to make sure we focus in on what our clients want. That's easier in the office sector. That's the sort of goalposts don't move quite so far as that's concerned. But when we're talking about science and technology, the myriad of things that go in to make that work for different companies at different stages of their development, we really need to be able to talk their language to get that door open and stay in sort of good conversations with these people. So it's so we've got an expert team who have got as good an understanding as the sector, I think, as there is, and as a result, the science inquiries have been consistent through the whole of COVID. Commercial office inquiries are down a little bit, but the science sector has held very, very strong for us, and looking good into 2021.
Okay, that's great. That's very helpful. Thank you for that feedback. And again, I've got some questions about which we'll come back to you on. So, if we could now, if you could turn, if Angus could turn on your screen, and Andrew, do you want to turn off yours? Angus, are you there with your camera? Any luck, Angus, with turning the camera on? There we go. Oh, brilliant! Well done, and the microphone as well. There we go. That's it. You're there. You're there. Well done. So Angus, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you here. You're the CEO of Oxford Technology Park, but I know you do other things. Maybe you could just explain your role there, but also what else you get up to, and also your interest in this subject.
Yeah, I bought the site. I'm the principal of Oxford Technology Park, which is a name we created some years ago to provide the production and high-tech space around the Oxford area, not really understanding the green belt and other planning issues long time ago. I escaped from surveying even longer ago than that, built a lot of high-tech and pharmaceutical type premises up and around Cambridge in the east, where we're principally based. And so it's been exciting, actually, albeit a long process, the last 3 or 4 years, to actually get the planning at OTP and work that through, a longer process than all of us ever imagine. But we've stuck to our principles that we're going to provide this production R&D high-tech space, so volume space, as opposed to office conversions, really to service a demand, burgeoning demand now around Oxford for this product. We always lament the fact that there are over 20 satellite business parks around Cambridge, and I think there's 3 plus around Oxford. So a long way to go. It's being recognised quite dramatically now, which is great to see. But I think there's a huge catch-up to be made there, not to allow this IP to leak out of Oxford, Oxfordshire, and out of the UK. We've seen plenty of that, but also we've seen occupiers leak away from us. We're about to build about 140,000 feet speculatively, which is a combination of lab-capable offices, plant room, vertical risers, that kind of thing. So really ready for Cat 2 fit out. But as well as the hybrid space, as we call it, which is typically 2-story portal frame industrial type space that is capable of fitting out for volume occupiers of any kind. Our experience has been, and interest has been, being north of Oxford, from a lot of materials-based companies, material science, around batteries, motors, that kind of technology, AI. But it won't surprise you to hear this year there's been a lot more around biomed again. And so we're enjoying a good level of inquiries for volume space, really across all of those sectors, I suppose. That probably brings you up to date. So the site is fully serviced, and with all main services. We have a hotel functioning on site again now, which is a great amenity. And just literally on the first, albeit delayed 6 months, on the first build out of the lab capable office on the park.
Okay, that's really helpful, and it's good to see speculative building happening. And I think that's a good sign of the market. It shows the health of the Oxfordshire market. So that's excellent. Thanks for that. We'll come back to you in a minute, Angus. If John, are you there? John Silversides. Great, John. Welcome. So, tail end, Charlie. Sorry about that, but these things happen. But if you could give us an overview, well, two things. One is just to say who you are and what you do to the audience, and secondly, to give an overview in your role at Carter Jonas in the commercial department of what's happening in the marketplace and bring people up to date.
Thanks, Matthew. So I'm a partner at Carter Jonas. I head up our commercial agency team. For my sins, I've worked in the Oxfordshire market for 25 years now. And before you ask, no, I don't dye my hair. During that time, frankly, the market has sort of bumbled along in a relatively benign way, probably until the last, I'm going to say 5 years, but sort of 10 years certainly. Sort of things have changed. Primarily, as we've seen a rapid increase in the rental terms. So we've started to get to a place where developers and investors can make things work, surrounding a huge number of other factors. My experience is both landlord and tenant side. During that 25 years, I've probably worked on most of the schemes in the county in one guise or another for various clients. At the moment, our instructions include Oxford Science Park for Magdalen College, where Magdalen have just completed the Bell House building, which is a lab-enabled building. I'm pleased to say about 60% of that is pre-committed, through to stock on the Oxford Business Park for legal and general. And then going slightly north, I suppose, in the context of your ARC discussions, we act for MEPC at Silverstone, which is very much a different type of tech, but I would certainly still describe it in the tech sector. And again, when we're talking about speculative development, we've got 250,000 square feet of space coming out of the ground there. It's a very different animal. It's probably slightly more attuned to your previous discussion, as it looks like a shed, but the technology going into these places I would include within our discussion, and we're about 80% now committed or under offer a month or two before PC. So we expect to get that all done and dusted, everything firmly crossed by the time we get to PC. So that's me. That's what I do. I do a bit of everything. Jack of all trades, some would say. I think in relation to the property market, specifically in Oxfordshire, so apologies to Rory, it's a tale of sort of two sides, if you like. On the one hand, you can't get away from the fact that you drive onto the main parks, and certainly for the last few months, there have been about 2 cars in the car park. I sat in our office here in Oxford, where we've got a 100-strong multidisciplined practice. But at the moment, we've probably got 20 to 25 people in the office, which is an increase, and we're starting to see increases over the last couple of weeks, and we'll start, hopefully, another lockdown aside, keep on ramping that up. So I don't think you can ignore that. But I think that what perversely is really interesting are the stats, and us surveyors love working the stats. But based on a 5-year average of take-up in the office and R&D market of about 250,000 square feet, so far to date, we're at 200,000 across the county. We were at 270 last year, so a little way off that, but still encouraging. And quite a bit of that is transacted during lockdown. Granted, some of that will be pre-committed, but nevertheless, these are still deals that are happening. I think the key statistic coming out of those figures, though, are 57% of those this year, and actually last year, so we're on exactly the same figure, are in the R&D and knowledge sector. And the year before that, 2018, was 71%. So we've seen a huge upsurge in that percentage. And I think you've touched on it, Matthew, but I think you just have to have regard to the context that we're comparing, perhaps Oxfordshire and other locations. It is an established, mature market. Obviously, the city centre is so tight that the debate and discussion we're going to have about coming out of town centres isn't particularly so relevant, but equally there are some relevances. All of our parks are long established now, but again, the key difference is in the last 5 years, there's been a change of ownership or structure in each of the main parks that we talk a lot about, which has brought with it investment into the parks. And each of those different parks, we can touch on the differences, offers something slightly different. So no one size fits all, I'd suggest, which is good. Oxfordshire is a fantastic place to do business, and I'm not naive enough to think that we're not in for a challenging winter. I appreciate this is the start of the discussion, but nevertheless, I think I'd much prefer to be a commercial agent here than perhaps the City of London, which again we'll come on to in a second later.
Okay, that's great, John. Thanks very much. That's very good. And I think also you kind of highlighted the market. If I could just keep you there for a second, and then we'll go on to Rory. But this idea, and I put it in a poll here about clusters, and I'm quite interested. Do you think the idea of clusters is encourages business tenants to take space? So in other words, if a business park can have I don't know what the word is, whether it's a theme or a particular skill set. The most obvious is obviously somewhere like Harwell, and they feed off each other to the point where staff move between each other, and so we go on in a purer cluster. Do you see that as a way forward in the future?
I think historically, absolutely. I mean, the cluster phenomenon is well documented both here at the US and around the world. So there's a lot of discussion, debate, and otherwise on that subject. And again, locally, you just have to look at the Science Park, Harwell, Milton, Culham, and each of those has their own clusters. In some circumstances, they have more than one cluster. And of course, particularly pertinently to where we are at the moment, a lot of those types of uses are not necessarily so affected by COVID because they're used to working in a compliant way. So, those are bucking the trend, and places like Harwell have obviously had the fillip of massive governmental input and investment, which is adding to the piece. Can you create a cluster? I think is another interesting topic. I think it's extremely difficult to do off the bat. I think you only have to realise the length of time that each of the ones I've just mentioned have been in operation, and the fact that a lot of them are based around a university or an original research facility. That takes tens of years to come through, and I think we're now seeing the benefit of the pump priming, if you like, into those cluster locations over sort of a historic period of time. I think what's quite interesting, although we're not agents for the main part of Oxford Business Park, is if you asked me 2 years ago, I would suggest that the business park would struggle, certainly even more so in today's climate because of the nature of the park, but with a change of ownership and a change of focus, and Oxford Biomedica sort of basing themselves there. You look at the number of science businesses they now have in the park, which is as a result of a number of things: availability, amenity space being put into it, but also I would suggest being with like-minded people and that clustering effect. So I wouldn't have said that 2 years ago, but now, and the next phase is going to be what we're calling a tech box, which is similar to what you see at Harwell in terms of an industrial style user, or a unit rather. And again, 2 years ago, you wouldn't have seen that. So I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, no, that's very good. That's very interesting. I think it shows how it's evolving. Maybe we could just, thanks very much for that. And Rory, perhaps you could just flick on your camera. And John, do you want to turn yours off? Great. Rory, it's interesting. You talk about 95% occupancy rate. And obviously I know there's a couple of, or I think it's one building coming out of the ground now.
Two at the moment.
I'm sorry about that. I was going to say a couple of buildings, but I hesitated. A couple of buildings. I should get down there more often. How do you see this discussion going? You talked about 55% of TMT. In a way that is a cluster. Are you kind of relaxed about all of this, or do you think actually we need to design buildings differently because I'm targeting this type of market, or is this discussion just not really relevant?
I would say that the way that we design and build buildings will change as a result of this. I don't think that is necessarily going to be particularly sector specific in terms of office design. I think there are a lot of themes that will apply to all businesses, whatever sector. Obviously, there's a lot of focus at the moment on the amount of fresh air and fresh air changes and so on. The IT connectivity has never been more important as we collaborate remotely. Some of us in the office, some of us not. So these types of things will become more important in specifying offices in future. In the two offices that we're delivering at Green Park at the moment, we are fortunate that we've actually ticked a number of the boxes that are becoming increasingly important. And one of the things that we chose to do early on was to deliver the buildings to the WELL certification. So we started off delivering them to a WELL Gold standard, and throughout the COVID pandemic, we've actually decided that we will increase that and deliver them to a WELL Platinum standard. So these are things that are focusing on air, light, things for human beings to thrive in an office environment. And so all of those kind of things will become more fundamental to having offices that are attractive and competitive to the likes of you and me, and therefore to businesses who want to employ the likes of you and me.
Yeah, no, interesting. Rory, we've got a question here. I mean, talking about this clustering, and I know there's a housing now you've introduced housing at Green Park, albeit through Berkeley Homes. Do you see that sort of mixed use discussion continuing, or not really? Do you see it very much as an office park environment, which will be self-contained?
No, I think mix of uses is increasingly helpful. Feeling part of a community and communities is important. Thinking about how staff can get to and from places of work, whether that's living close by, having good road transport, having good public transport, being able to walk or cycle, to have as many combinations as possible will become more important. Likewise, in the conversations about hub and spoke, a lot of that is based on where do the majority of my staff live, where do they want to work, how much will they want to commute, how much of their work is task focused rather than collaborative versus going out and meeting people. All of these things come into play, and having a mix of uses forms an important part of that, both in terms of office and residential, but also the supporting amenities like the hotels, the retail, the catering, the F&B, and so on.
Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. You raised some interesting issues about the design and delivery of buildings, and maybe that's something, Andrew, you can comment on. Andrew, are you there? Rory, maybe you could turn off your screen and we'll get Andrew back on.
Yeah. Hi, Matthew.
Yeah.
Am I back in the room?
Yeah. The issue really is, which Rory highlights, is, I mean, it's interesting, the WELL certification and the importance of that. But obviously, the environment now is mission critical. How do you? Is that an expensive problem, or is it a resolvable problem?
Well, I think if you're doing the way Rory's doing it, which is as part of your original construction project, that's clearly the time to get it done. And if you're looking to attract, if your audience is science-focused businesses, then whilst the government's got a net zero target of 2050, the likes of AstraZeneca, their net zero target is 2030. So that's a really, really high priority for for the big players in the science market. After all, they're about improving the human condition, and whether that be individual wellness or the planet. I think try and get that well certification up front is fundamental, but that's not always reality. I think when the 2050 comes around, we'll still have 80% of the building stock that we've got now. So there's when there's opportunities to refurbish, I think we have to look at renewables. We have to consistently look at renewables and challenge the skeptics. I think we have to push back on that because ultimately we all have a vested interest in it. But certainly the science occupiers, that's high on their agenda.
And is the sort of retrofitting of M&E systems, is that how's that going to be resolved with COVID-19 and people going back into the office? Is that something? Obviously, I think there's a pressure, excuse the pun, to put in fresh air and circulate that. But how's that work in reality?
Yeah, I think I think in terms of confidence, fresh air circulation, air changes, I think possibly missed a trick. There are companies who have adopted prop tech software systems that, where there's been early adoption, they've been able to communicate through apps to people to let them know, how their building's functioning. They can see, where there's a clean desk for them to go in and occupy. They can see what air changes are being achieved. They can look at humidity, temperature, all sorts of things. So that prop tech thing, multifaceted, and it can, and I wouldn't be surprised. And certainly if you're achieving well platinum, then you'd be looking to have some really good systems in there. Big part of creating science space, creating laboratories. It's laboratories. It's all about air changes per hour. So we're heavily focused on that. That's always going to be fundamental to the design. So it's looking at the renewables that you can build in, and it's there's opportunities at refurb points to do some things to adjust and tweak your building. Need to understand that the electrical supply that you're going to need for a laboratory space is going to be different frequencies, different requirements on the system. It's going to be larger, although you'll be less densely occupied. There's things like getting louvers around the building, so once people occupy, they've got it's easy to adapt and change. Getting those risers that we've talked about earlier. Direct risers up through the building. How are you going to manage fumes? How do you get deliveries of gas into the right areas of the buildings? There's a huge amount to think about, but I think renewables has got to be right up there.
Okay, thank you for that. Angus, do you want to come in there? Are you there, Angus? Just want to. Angus, excellent. So you mentioned about some of the companies you're looking at. When you look at your scheme, the tech park, did you think about having a wider mix of development, or is it? I mean, when I say that, is it purely offices, or did you think about having a mix? I guess resi is probably not really what I meant, but a different type of office building, maybe, but or maybe some retail. I don't know, but could you just what's your thought process when you put the development together?
Yeah, we're doing things slightly the other way around. We do have a lab-capable office building, which is a statement building on the frontage, which is just going up now alongside the hotel. But our approach is very much not building offices. So our buildings are a volume production R&D building, but capable of accommodating grade A office within that, which is a cheaper platform, but also alongside anything really, production, R&D, lab, warehousing. So an absolute hybrid, and our planning permission is a B1, B2, B8, across the piece. So we're specifically not creating office, we're creating a production and yeah, as I say, R&D park really. It is on the periphery of town. It's 4 or 5 miles out of town, but it's hugely accessible from Oxford itself. So yeah, we're specifically not creating offices actually, and designed this for a long time, or since its inception really. And through the planning process, we're building absolutely what we said we would, which is this production R&D space. And of course, that's not what's being produced elsewhere, well, hitherto really around Oxford, but on any basis. So it is something different. But I mean, just touching on some of the other points now, the hub and spoke, I guess in this instance, Oxford is the hub, and the IP is absolutely coming from that cluster and wants to remain in that cluster. I think we're all pretty much, wherever we're from, aware of the constraints around that, whether it's green belts, the flood meadows, or other factors. So we are the spoke to that IP in Oxford City, and as something I said before, to keep the IP through its second, third plus generation move on of evolution of that IP into the companies. There are many examples, as you know, and to keep it locally based and obviously enjoy the benefits.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you for that. John, could you come back on, and then maybe you could just, John, Angus raised an excellent point about Oxford Tech Park being the spoke really for the hub, which is Oxford, which I hadn't really thought. I tend to sort of think of London being the hub and us revolving around it, which is terrible, isn't it, really? But what's your view on the whole hub and spoke sort of discussion? Is it? I mean, it's interesting looking at the poll. A lot of people seem to feel that the hub, the hub and spoke will be, just looking at the polls here, almost 50% of the 40 people who answered feel that hub and spoke is going to be a solution moving forward. I mean, what's your thought as as an expert?
I think one could argue that the hub and spoke is actually now the hub is the office and the spoke is home. Another way of looking at it, perhaps. Yeah. I'm not sure, actually. We see quite. I mean, I take Angus's point about Oxford being a hub in this instance, but your previous comment about London being the hub and Oxford being the spoke, I'm not sure we see so much of that here. I think if you look at the vast majority of our businesses on our business and science parks, they are their own headquarters or primary facilities in those locations. So I see less of it. Yes, we do have national businesses here as part of a network. But I think if you go to any of the aforementioned parks, they are standalone facilities in their own right.
Right. Okay. And do you think that we're going to see? I guess one of the issues from this question is: can you see a change in the way tenants are looking at space? We talked about different designs. Rory talked about a different design, maybe. And the need. He talked about the WELL certification, for example. But can you see that discussion now starting to affect tenant needs?
I think there are a myriad of impactful factors on that decision. And certainly what we're seeing at the moment, just as a direct knee-jerk reaction to COVID, is a degree of movement as some occupiers are taking the opportunity to downsize where they have the ability to do so, or move sideways into more flexible space. And there's been a bit of a boost into the service sector. So again, looking for that flexibility. But as yet, all the normal factors that would affect a business decision, to my mind, are unchanged. So location, amenities, transport, housing, all the normal factors. And then, like I said, when you look at the stats I gave earlier and the percentage of lab and knowledge take-up, it then becomes very specific as to availability, access to companies that they do business with, and the type of building. Again, it's been commented on about the type of building a lot, but if you're a lab occupier, that's where the big change has been over the last few years, is the emergence of, and as Angus has mentioned, voluminous type buildings at Harwell, where labs can just be dropped in, versus the lab-enabled buildings that we've got at the Science Park, which are designed for those occupiers. So I don't personally think that, I disagree that the hub and spoke argument is a big one. I personally think it is the myriad of factors that I've just sort of alluded to.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I tend to agree. I think for people like me, it's a wonderful recipe to talk to people, but I wonder in reality, once we get going, I think it may change the whole story, and we'll see how we go. Although interestingly, further you go along the M4, that may be a different discussion. Just to bring Rory back in, I don't know if you could turn off your camera, John, and then we'll just bring Rory back in. Rory, we just had a chat about hub and spoke and what have you. You alluded to the fact that some of your TMT clients are very comfortable working from home by definition. How, as a business park owner and in terms of your property management, how are you kind of encouraging people to get back into the office and get that discussion going, or are you fairly relaxed about it?
We've got to be careful that we aren't seen to be unduly pressuring people. People have to feel confident that it is safe to come back in. I think for me, what's important is that people are coming back into the office for the right reasons and to achieve the right goals. There isn't, in my view, much point in going back to the office for the sake of sitting in an office. You've got to understand, well, what is it about being in an office that adds to my my contribution to the company, to my life, to my well-being. And I mentioned productivity, and for the most part, productivity has been fairly strong with people working from home because we are well able to do task-based work. We can send off emails just as easily from home as we can from the office. To a certain degree, we can collaborate reasonably well from home on forums like this. The technology that supports this is excellent, but there are a lot of things that fall outside of that that are a really important part of people's working lives. So a few examples are the ability to socialize with colleagues is almost impossible to do it remotely. We try, but it's not very easy. To mentor people coming into the world of work, it's very difficult for them to learn from colleagues when they're working completely remotely. Educational needs often get overlooked. Company culture is quite hard to engender amongst a team when you're working remotely. So if businesses feel that they are struggling with 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these things, then I think that's when they need to make the decision that they should be trying to encourage their staff back to work where it is safe to do so. Now, where we fit in as an owner in that is that we've had a lot of feedback from our occupiers that they miss the environment, they miss the landscaping, they miss the nature. A lot of people have said, well, have the nesting swans of the goslings hatched yet? And so we've set up wildlife webcams and things like that. We had scheduled to have about 450 occupier events in 2020. About half of those have gone online, so we've been running online boot camps and language courses and book clubs. We sent people bird building kits to their home addresses, and so that you can have an online bird building. We've got a baker's corner with kind of bread baking courses and all those kind of things to reinforce that sense of community that people have been missing from coming into the workplace. So I think we're here to support, we're here to help people come back to the office, but we don't want to be the one pressuring people unduly to come back in. We want to show them the benefits and demonstrate how it can be done safely.
Yeah, fascinating. And to a certain extent, if you're receiving your bird building kit at home, it's rather nice because you can sort of enjoy that in your own sanctuary, excuse the pun, and get on with it. And but it's also, joking aside, I think your idea and the ability to create a sense of community is really key. And I know we've talked about it in the past. It's a very important issue, and the way I would say sort of part of the DNA of Green Park. and I think that's other business parks talk about it, but don't always do it. So I think it's really fascinating to hear that. And would you say that's just a natural progression for Green Park, or I guess where does it end? I suppose because the blurring of lines between home and work is quite clear.
Yeah, I don't think that we will stop offering these things online now that they've started and they've been so successful. But clearly, it doesn't completely replace doing it in person or on site. So we're looking forward to getting back to that as quickly as we can. But as you say, it's something that a lot of people talk about. It's actually very difficult to do, and we've invested a lot of effort, hours, human sort of capital into that over a large number of years, and we don't want this one incident to destroy all of that hard work.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. Right, I'm going to get a few of the others up online. Andrew, could you keep your camera off? And I'm going to turn mine off. And John, can you turn yours on along? Right, there we go. Okay, that's good. Can you hear us still, Andrew? Are you out there?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, don't take it personally. But we have seen you, so we know you're there. So one thing I just wanted to pick up on that, as we've got three of you there, I was interested, Angus, how this idea of a sense of community. Yep, you're still putting your scheme together, so to speak, and the tech part, Oxford Tech Park. How will you get that sense of community? What's your thoughts on that? I know you've had some experience elsewhere doing that.
Yeah, Passy, my colleague, who you all know, is working very hard on that. She pioneered a community of business people in North Oxford, which as a group we're just getting together now, spanning across academic sort of networks and businesses alike, which is a great sort of grounding, I suppose, great start to that. But in terms of the park itself, we're very anxious to provide sustainable transport links, that kind of thing, through to the new Parkway Station, Park and Ride, and various other initiatives. We've got a plan also for a gym and leisure centre on another sort of quiet part of the park, which will be useful. It's not coming on stream for a couple of years, but yeah, just trying to bring that whole community together, along with the hotel accommodation. I suppose it's about providing the amenity is the basic recipe to create a successful work-life balance, as they say. Slightly more challenging because we're only 500,000 square feet in total, plus the gym and leisure and other things. But it will still have a critical mass and a place of its own in this, the Oxford, in this sort of sub-community. So that's, as you say, just at the outset, but that's what we're very much trying to do, is create that sense of place in otherwise what is a relatively dense employment location, certainly compared to Green Park. They've got pretty stacked high-rise office buildings. We're more of an industrial location, and not to play us down, but we're in the business of production, R&D. It's quite a dense park, but plenty of amenity and green space around it, along with the other facilities I've described. So very much in mind, and no pressure, Classy. I know you're watching to bring that along.
And Angus, in terms of getting the hotel, who was the hotel operator? And was that complicated to get that? The planners receptive?
Remarkably, yes. John will chuckle at this, but yeah, I'm very. Every member supported it. It's a Whitbread hotel, it's a Premier Inn, so it's kind of middle of the range, but very reliable and trusted in the marketplace. So we see they've been very busy, both from the industry point of view, from business and commerce, whether that's the airport, pilots, Airbus, business in general. And haven't really seen the summer trade yet, of course, the Blenheim and Woodstock and other tourists, but certainly a steady flow and a real range of guests we see in and out of the hotel next door. So it's been a success, very good, yeah. Not least the dine out to help out, through August was seemed to be inundated, strangely. But
yeah, very good. And John, this discussion about business environments, are you? And I'm not suggesting that property agents are cynical, but do you believe it works, or are you more phlegmatic about these things?
I think when we're particularly talking about the business and science park community, absolutely. Again, I'm repeating myself, each of the main parks in the county has an amenity offering, and they usually follow the same thing. Some are better than others, and again, Angus has pointed to a very new point about size and scale. You're down at Hilton Park or Harwell, you've got that much more oomph behind you to be able to afford these things, and so their offerings are much more mature. And I think that on the assumption that most have that, and or you're close to an amenity offering, the key differentiator I've seen, which is particularly pertinent to the science and the clustering discussion that we had, is the ability to network, the ability to share. Certainly my direct experience at both Oxford Science Park and Silverstone Park is where we've been able to differentiate, and I'm sure there are plenty of other examples, is by fostering that relationship between both the clients, our respective clients, and more importantly, the customers or occupiers. So on both of those, there are regular events held, and they're oversubscribed. There's usually a queue of people wanting to do the discussion piece, and everybody hangs around and has a good chat, because both of those key parks, they love sharing their views, sharing their knowledge, and that's what makes it tick.
Okay, that's very good. Just going through a couple of questions here, as it only right and proper, as we've got people dialing in. One thing that's come up a couple of times, I mean, Jim's called it co-location. This idea of, and it's come up with the idea of having residential and sort of live-work offer, I guess you call it, within the business park. So, I mean, it has pros and cons, but and Claire suggests if we make these business parks central, residential settlement, these amazing places should connect with their communities. I'm thinking about young minds, the spectacular work going on and inspirational for the next generation, should work hard to attract local talent and not become elitist. All good stuff. And there's a couple others like that. There's also a mention by Julian at Kratos of Syntegra, which is a very big scheme. Is it Syntegra? Have I got that right? Sorry. No, Syngenta, which is a big scheme in between Maidenhead and Bracknell, very big scheme, which is doing some quite interesting things. But what's your view as a panel, I mean, on this kind of idea of live, work, play? I mean, Rory, you've sort of answered it. Angus, where do you kind of fit with all this?
Well, given the discussion about people not wanting to travel and the like and commuting, it's a fantastic idea. But if you want to tell that to the powers that be and the planning authorities, they will do it a lot quicker. Really quite, I was surprised in the first place, but really quite pleased to see the sensible solution to fellows housing, that kind of thing, around Begbrook Science Park, where we are close to. And I think that theme could be really followed quite well. And whether people are commuting into the city or want to go to Begbrook or other science parks, yes, it's a theme that absolutely would work, especially in the lovely environs around, well, anywhere around Oxfordshire really. But it's not something that's really been challenged yet in planning specifically, and that's the rub. That's the problem.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Just quickly, John. I mean, obviously Oxford Science Park, and there's plans afoot for a bigger scheme there, closer to the football ground, I think. Where do you fit on all of this? And I know you're working down at the science park and elsewhere, but does it kind of take away from supplying office space? Is kind of what you really want, or is it a healthy discussion?
No, not at all. I mean, it's quite simple. I sort of share some of Angus's views in terms of the planning regime. Deliver a train at a station at the science park and deliver the houses off the Noble Road. You then in one hit take sort of resolve everything. So you've got your housing next to your science park. You can cater for both. But this has been discussed not only at the science park. It's been discussed at Harwell and Milton. Milton's 2040 vision has residential included within it. Harwell's talked quite a bit about sort of residential. So And again, if you then go up to the Northwest Cambridge site, which Cambridge University have done, which is comparable to Oxford University's proposals for Begbrook, that is completely intrinsic in terms of the development there. So again, looking worldwide, that is a well-documented piece, and it's proven in the right place. But again, the reality of Oxford, developing around Oxford, we have enough challenges.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Rory, just, I mean, John mentioned international there. Obviously, I would suggest Mapletree is international in their view on this. And what's the view coming from Mapletree? And obviously, arguably, you know, you could say Green Park is an exemplar, and you would probably compare with somewhere in Boston or wherever. What's your view, sort of at that top level? What's the feedback you're getting on where we are at the moment internationally with the market? Do you get much feedback on that?
Yeah, so we, as an investor, are still buying in Europe. Our focus is at the moment do include science-based locations and parks. That's a target of growth for us, not necessarily focused in the UK, but across Europe. Data centers, another big focus for us. They're an asset class we found difficult to buy at scale in the UK, so a lot of our purchases to date have been in the US, but that's a sector that we're continuing to look for in the UK or development opportunities to do so. And these are the type of things that have been quite robust through the COVID pandemic. And of course, we are investing a huge amount in taking forward the development at Green Park at the moment, and that is set to continue. There's an ambition to continue the development there. So yes, we've got some headwinds. Brexit is another headwind that does concern some of my colleagues in Singapore, but yet they are generally confident that we're invested in the right locations and continuing to do so with focus.
Okay, I managed to avoid the B word for almost 57 minutes and 21 seconds, but there we go. It's a very important point, and if I mention international, it's obviously key, and so you're quite right and proper to say that. Now, just as we come to the very end, Andrew, do you want to just sum up some of your feelings? I mean, you've heard about this sector with the sciences and the growth there. Where do you see that market going, and are you, as a company, confident about moving forward?
Yeah, I think you know, with all these things in a specific market, you can start to look at some of the data. I think we look at the government's research and development roadmap published a few months back. Then you know, they're looking to champion investment in science parks around the UK, and you know, I think it's something Angus has alluded to, that if we want to keep the you know, the brilliant organisations we've got within the region, then you know, we need to be really offering you know, first-class service. We need to be first-class construction professionals. Just got to keep, you know, absolutely keep our eye on the ball. Not any room for complacency. You know, I've seen a couple of people relocate out of the area, which has been, yeah, we've followed one of them, which has been good. But yeah, you know, I think as a sector, you know, we just got to keep providing sustainable, connected solutions for people. You know, keep listening. You know, we're continually talking to people, you know, end users in the market to try and make sure our offer is appropriate. And I think it's incumbent, you know, I'm sure everyone is doing it, but we've just got to make sure we're very, very relevant moving forward.
Okay, that's really helpful, and thank you. And thank you to all the speakers, to Rory, Angus and John. If you could turn your cameras off, and I'll do a quick sum up, but thank you very much.
Yeah.
There we go. We are now at the end of UK Prop Fest. It's been interesting, exciting, and incredibly rewarding. We've got more content than we know what to do with. Apologies for not answering all your questions. We tried to run through some of them, but there's quite a lot there. But we have tried very hard to go through that. So we come to the very end. Just to say, I've just this week got confirmation that John Keppel, who's the CEO of Zurich Re, will be doing a webinar with us. He's just made a decision to occupy, or not just, they've made a decision that Zurich Re to occupy their head office in Swindon, and we're going to speak to him later on in the month. So details on that. And that's it, really. Just to say thanks very much for listening. Thank you once again to all our sponsors. So that's Seago, Barton Wilmore, Stantec, and Janssens. I can't do without them. So thanks very much for doing that. We'll do more of this. Look online. Please come back. We're going to do the big event next year. It's Bicester Motion or Bicester Heritage, which is one of the subsets of it. It's going to be very exciting. So please stay with us. And good luck, stay safe, and look after yourself. Take care. Bye.